Hey guys, today I'm doing a tutorial on how to tone the individual panels on a page, but first I wanted to show you guys some of the materials that I actually used for that. So this is a cleaned out mochi ice cream container. It's got 6 fairly deep wells, and I use this to apply larger washes since it's got a fairly capacious load capacity. I also use these little cups for my larger washes, and the pages I paint are 10 by 14. So this is just a little demo page to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about, and I'm going to go grab the rest of my materials. So for these sort of very small isolated washes, I will typically use a larger round, and I've got 2 synthetics here, a 26 Mimic Creative Mark, it's a synthetic brush, and a 10 Halcyon. I will also sometimes use cat's tongue or filbert, a mop, or a flat, depending on what I'm doing. So we're going to go ahead, get this little demonstration started. For a full tutorial on painting comic pages, I have quite a few videos. You can check out this one here. And to see what it's like to work in batch for a week, you can click, let's give it 10 seconds. Anyway, usually what I would do is I would pour a significant amount of water into one of these. I'm not going to do that because I don't need that much. So we're just going to make a little puddle here. And we're going to grab, let's go for some really disparate colors. So we'll grab New Gamboge, mix that in. So when I am painting or toning or doing washes on individual panels, what I will do is I will paint every panel that's going to use that color. And then I create a thirsty brush by squeegeeing out the excess liquid from my brush, and I just kind of go over it again and absorb all that extra liquid. And then, so I don't want to push that up. We've got this panel down here. Go ahead, grab some water. We're going to go with a darker color for this so I can demonstrate another technique. So sometimes when I'm toning, I'm using a dark color, and I don't want it to negative, or maybe even a color that, like a green or a blue, that might look weird when you paint a skin tone on top of it. So we've got permanent mauve here, and I am holding a paper towel in my hand. So normally what I would do is I go ahead, I do the wash, maybe I soak up the extra water, then I use a clean paper towel and I'll dab it out from any light areas or areas of skin, basically anything that would be kind of muddy if you were to paint on top of it, and it doesn't have to be too specific. And then, creating a thirsty brush, I'll go ahead and soak up the excess water. And sometimes I'll even sort of soften the transition by blending it with clean water. So, like maybe I want some shadow on her where her bangs would be. And under her neck like that. And then I'll go ahead and paint on top of that once that has fully dried. So if we've got adjacent areas, usually what I'll do, with different colors, usually what I'll do is my yellow has dried, my purple has not. So, oh, dripping all over the place here. I'm going to go ahead and fill this panel here. And we're going to do that with a blue. And you want to wait until the paint is fully dry. I guess this paint wasn't fully dry because it kind of smooshed over on into the next panel. And you guys can see that is a really, really dark tone. So we're just going to dab it out of her face, create a thirsty brush, and then absorb the excess liquid with said thirsty brush. So I've got several wet panels here. Let's say you have an area like this where the paint has overflowed into your other panel. If it's still wet, you can just fold up your paper towel to make kind of a harder edge and just scoop it up like that. It may still stain. Urban Blue Violet is a fairly staining color, but it's a lot better than having done nothing at all to lift it. So we've got 2 wet panels and we've got 3 panels left to fill. What I would normally do is step away and let it dry for a while. So I'm going to do just that. Alright, so those panels have basically dried. We're going to do another wash now with, I think, Winsor Newton Green Gold. And all of these would be mixed up in much larger quantities, and if I needed to, I could then work around the character and darken that, and I can demonstrate in that bottom panel if you guys, if that would be helpful. But I don't normally do any sort of masking to protect my panel edges. Sometimes I'll mask out certain areas using Winsor & Newton masking fluid, but I don't mask out my borders. I don't apply like wax for a wax resist to protect my borders. I will usually just do them digitally with a color pencil brush. And when doing borders, I really, if I have multiple colors on a page, like we have here, I really just do them kind of one at a time. Usually takes, depending on the weather outside, it can take very little time at all, like 2 to 3 minutes sometimes if it's very, very dry, to 10 plus minutes if it's wet. And depending on what paper you're using, you're going to get different results as well. Cellulose papers tend to dry out quicker than cotton rag papers do, but cotton rag papers are usually workable a little sooner than cellulose-based papers. So we've got another panel down here to fill. And we want to absorb that extra liquid. I also will sometimes do glow effects in my panels while they're wet, and that's really simple. Let's grab some New Gamboge. Usually I would use a round for this, but I'm holding a flat, so you would just drop it into the area that you want to create a glow, using the color that you want to use for a glow or a halo, and then let that dry. So I'm going to demonstrate 2 more things for you guys. I'm going to show you how to darken the background in a panel around a character, and then we'll fill in our last panel. Alright, so the interior of this panel is still wet, but the borders are dry, and for me that usually means I can go ahead and move on. Just grab some Hooker's Green, and normally I would also work in much lower saturation than this if I'm just toning panels, because toning is just sort of a pre-prep for what's going on in the panel, and it can be used to denote a lighting situation, an emotional state, or to help establish the background early on. Also, if you take the time to absorb the excess water, then your drawing time is actually going to be a little shorter. It's often a lot shorter. So if you're one of those people who's really impatient with watercolor, you may be over applying water to your paper, and by absorbing some of that, you can help cut back on that. So we've got 1 more panel to do. I'm going to let everything fully dry before I do it. So I'll see you guys in a minute. So before we say goodbye, I'm going to show you guys how to intensify the color in a specific panel around the character. It's actually very, very simple. I'm using a round for this because I can get into tight corners and details. We're going to grab some more of that permanent mauve since that was the original color. And we're just going to like glaze it on top, basically. Very simple. Now if you get some areas like this where the color has kind of escaped its bounds, there's ways you can fix that, and I can actually show you that before I sign off. So this would be a lighter layer of the same color. You can also go in, maybe you want to imply, say, surprise, and using the same or a different color, you can kind of work wet into wet and add dots or squares or whatever. This is a technique I use fairly frequently in 7-inch Cara, and I'm usually using a contrasting color or a danger color, so yellow, orange, red, anything that would imply sort of an unpleasant shock. And you can add as much or as little as you like to the background. And I've been cleaning up as I go. I'm working on an Ink Essentials craft mat, and it's really helpful for these sort of demonstrations. So before I say goodbye, I'm going to show you how to clean up an area. Let me zoom in for you guys. Like that. It's very simple, but we do need all of this to dry first. Alright, so it hasn't fully dried, but before we head out, I'm going to show you guys how to lift something like that. And I have found that for lifting, I want to use a synthetic brush, usually something with stiff bristles, but not so stiff that they're going to tear up the paper. So this Cottman flat should work just fine, and I may have a problem because it is wet up until where we're correcting. I was kind of hoping that would not be the case. But you just kind of want to scrub at the area a little bit, which will lift up some of the paint, and it may lift up some of the other color as well, the color from the other panel. And then using the same technique that we used up there, we're going to apply our paper towel and blot, and that'll pick up at least some of the color, if not all of the color. Of course, because I was working against a wet area, it's just seeping back in, but you guys get the drift. So thank you guys so much for checking out this quick tutorial on how I tone individual panels. I know this looks like a hot mess, so you're going to have to check out my comic 7-inch Cara at 7inchcara.tumblr.com to see how my art actually looks if you're not familiar with it. I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you'll check out some of my other watercolor tutorials on the blog and here on this channel. Bye guys!